times, the times that are driving people nuts. We're looking at a series, not one, not two, not three, but 4 or 5 crises simultaneously in a way that we have never seen before. So what are we looking at? Number one, obviously, we are looking at a pandemic, which has now taken 150,000 lives, and which, because of the gross irresponsibility and stupidity of this president who downplayed this virus from day one, who turned his back on science, that as a result of his desire to open up the economy as quickly as he could, what we're seeing is a surge in the pandemic in state after state after state. So you got a pandemic which is running wild throughout this country. Number two, you have simultaneously an economic meltdown, the likes of which we have not seen since the Great Depression. What we're talking about are tens of millions of people who have lost their jobs. And in this country, when you lose your job, in many cases, you lose your health insurance. And people who have no money are unable to put food on the table. So we're looking at kids facing hunger. We're looking at families being evicted from their apartments, people not being able to pay their credit card bills. So you got that whole economic collapse. And then on top of that, we're looking at the existential threat to our planet of climate change. And some of you may have noticed just a few weeks ago in Siberia, one of the coldest regions on Earth, the temperature was 100 degrees. 100 degrees in Siberia, complete record-breaking temperature. All over the world, we're seeing polar ice melting. We're seeing the oceans becoming more acidified. We're seeing rising sea levels. And that is what's taking place. And then on top of all of that, we're seeing the largest series of rallies and demonstrations in the modern history of this country. People who are standing up and fighting against systemic racism and police brutality. And then added to all of that is a president who is not only turning his backs on working people, not only a pathological liar and a racist and a sexist and a homophobe and a xenophobe, but maybe even more importantly, this is a guy who does not believe in democracy. And as we speak, he is sending his own personal army into city after city in order to arrest protesters and demonstrators. And this is a president who has said, well, you know, if I lose the election, I may not quite be prepared to leave office because, you know, I'm not sure that the election results will be quite accurate. So you got a president who, in an ahistorical way, never happened before, does not really believe in the rule of law, does not believe in democracy. What does that mean? Where does that take us? It takes us to the fact that in about 100 days, there's going to be an election, which will be the most important election in American history. And this is not just an election about healthcare or education or climate change. This is an election about whether or not we maintain our democratic form of government. That's what this election is about. So in the next 100 days, we have got to do everything that we can in terms of reaching out to our friends, family, fellow workers, fellow students, to make sure that we have the highest voter turnout in the history of this country and that we defeat Trump. But we've got to do more than that. We've got to elect progressive candidates to the Congress, to the state legislature, to district attorneys and prosecutor offices. And I got to say, we in the progressive movement have had some pretty good results in the last several months. We've had really strong progressives from Congress on down, winning their primaries, and everything being equal, many of them are going to win their general elections. And then not only do we have to bring our people together to defeat Trump, not only do we have to elect progressives through federal, state, and local positions. But we have got to also maintain our vision. Because in the midst of campaign and dealing with the media and everything else, we can forget what we are fighting for and what kind of country we want to become. And that means that we want an economy that works for all, not just the few. We want to end starvation wages in America and the reality that half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. We want to end a corrupt political system in which billionaires and super PACs can control to a very significant degree what goes on politically. We want to join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee healthcare to all people as a human right. And if there was ever a moment when the American people understand how dysfunctional, how cruel the current healthcare system is, this is that moment. Because unlike other countries in America, for many workers, healthcare is a job benefit, not a human right. You lose your job, you lose your healthcare. And that's the case for millions and millions of workers right now. And that is why we have got to continue the fight for a Medicare for all single payer program. And we have got to make sure that in America, all of our people, regardless of income, get the quality education that they need. That means making public colleges and universities tuition free, and it means canceling all student debt. That younger generation, which is struggling economically right now, cannot handle the kind of student debt which they have been forced to assume. And it means, as we're seeing in the streets right now, the fight to end systemic racism in this country, the American people increasingly are sick and tired of institutional racism in all forms of our society, economically, socially, in healthcare and education. They're tired of it. And they want to be rid of systemic racism in this country. And they want to be rid of police brutality and police murders. And the American people also understand that the time is long overdue for serious and real immigration reform and a path towards citizenship for the undocumented. So I say all of that, that in the midst of the struggles that we are engaged in, the need to defeat Trump, the need to elect Biden, the need to elect progressive candidates at the federal, state, and local level, we cannot lose sight of our vision for a new America. So within the next week, I will tell you that I will be fighting as hard as I can right now on what is called the COVID-5 legislation being debated in the Congress. And clearly the Republican proposal that was announced today by Republican Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is totally inadequate. We're not going to cut by 2/3 the unemployment benefits that our workers receive. We are not going to not fund nutrition programs. We're not going to not put money into elections. We are going to put money into hazard pay. We are going to put money into nutrition. We are going to save the United States Postal Service. And in my view, we should move to making sure that every person in this country gets a $2,000 check per month during this crisis, as well as health care during the crisis as a human. So let me conclude by just saying there is a whole lot of stuff that's going on. I mean, if you feel a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit bewildered, you're not alone. We are all kind of reeling by the kind of crises that we're facing, by the irresponsibility of this president, and by the need to stay focused. Bottom line is that the next 100 days may well be the most important 100 days in the history of our country. There is an enormous amount of work that has to be done. Let's stay focused. Let's do it. Let's defeat Trump, and let us move this country in a very new and different direction. Thank you all very much.
Bye. Bye. Oh, that's sweet.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to what I think is going to be a really exciting discussion tonight, because we have three fantastic panelists with us, three members or soon to be members of the United States Congress, who are going to take that progressive banner, full standing into conflict with the establishment, politicians, and corporate elite, and represent the working families of this country. These are great people who have run great campaigns. And let me introduce them to you. Re-elected last night in a landslide victory. They told us, Rashida, it was going to be a tough race. Won, what was it, 66 to 33 or something?
A little 69. It's like,
Really? But who was counting? All right, congratulations.
Thank you so much. I thank you, Amo Bernie. I really appreciate everything. You know, what I love about you is, you know, you didn't become the Democratic nominee, but you didn't give up on this movement, and you continue to support so many of us that are speaking truth, that are really putting people before profit. And I just can't thank you enough for not giving up on this movement, and just continue to support people like us.
How could I give up when we have people like you guys? I mean, you inspire me. You inspire the American people. Jamaal Bowman won an incredible victory. He took on the entire political establishment. Is that fair to say, Jamaal?
Pretty fair, yes.
You took on a 16-term incumbent, and you won by not quite as much as Rashida.
Not as much as Rashida, but 16 points. Not bad, not bad.
Not too bad at all. And last but certainly not least, we have the heroine of the moments from St. Louis, Missouri, where they're not supposed to have progressive politics. Cori Bush, I think, as everybody knows, won a tremendous upset victory last night. She took on a 10-term incumbent. She didn't win with 69%. She didn't win by 15%, but she won. I think it was what, four points that you won.
Yes.
All
yes,
right.
I can't believe it.
Well, believe it. You're going to person, so you better believe it. All right, we got three great people here. I want to start her off. Cori, I think you have a little bit of a time constraint, do you? We have to get you out a little bit early, or not the case?
No,
not
I'm
the
okay.
Case. All right.
9 o'clock.
Well, this is what I'd like to discuss. We got plenty of time to do it. And one of the things that all four of us have in common as members of Congress, or soon to be members of Congress, is we grew up in working class families. We all did. So I want you all in a moment to think about what impact did growing up in a working class family have on your politics. I want you to talk about, if you could, you've been out on the campaign trail as best you could, given the COVID epidemic. I know Rashida would have knocked on every door in her district 3 times over, but couldn't. What are you hearing? What's going on? Rashida's from Detroit, Jamaal is from New York, Cori is from St. Louis, I'm from Vermont, different states, different needs. What's common? What are people talking about? And why do you think, in every instance with you three, people were prepared to vote for a progressive candidate and put aside establishment type candidates, because in every case you are running, in all due respect, this is not maligning anybody, but just that you are running against establishment candidates. And the last question I want you to think about for this line of discussion is, where do we go from here? This is the richest country in the history of the world. We have an exploding technology, great knowledge base. Why do we have so much poverty? Why are so many people living paycheck to paycheck? What's your vision for a newer America? Let's start off then with our re-elected Congresswoman from Detroit, Rashida Tlaib. Rashida, tell us a little bit about your background and how that maybe influenced your politics.
Yeah, I think folks need, I mean, my dad was a UAW member, Ford worker, an auto plant. He only had fourth grade education. First time he really felt human dignity is when he joined the UAW, and he felt a power that, yes, he deserves fair wages, he deserves health coverage. My mother, only eighth grade education, both Palestinian immigrants. And what I love is, I'm the eldest of 14, so I've been taking care of people all my life. And I just remember being my mother's translator until I was 12 years old and going up to the counters and always translating for her. And even though she understood English, she never would speak it because of the
What did she speak? Arabic?
Arabic. She spoke Arabic. And I would translate for her, Bernie. And I remember being at Sears, when folks know where Sears is now. I don't know. And I remember going up to the counter and I would translate for my mom. And the cashier one time says, why doesn't she speak English? She should learn English. And I look at her and I said, but do you notice I'm not translating what you're saying to her? I'm only translating what she wants to say to you, because people like you look down upon her because she's trying. She's trying to, start a new life for her children here and have the opportunities that she didn't have. And I just, in so many ways remember being that little girl and now, thinking back, like my parents, the first to graduate from high school and college, and now I'm a freaking United States Congresswoman. And it was people driven. I didn't take corporate PAC money to do it. I didn't have to sell out to do it. And, it's these lived experiences that we bring of this kind of othering that happens in our policies, these kinds of othering that happens within culture of these policies that doesn't give us a fair shot, that really leaves us behind. You see it in the pandemic. It's been exposed so much over and over again during this pandemic. But Amo Bernie, it is an honor. And Cori, I just want you to know you'll still be in awe. I walk on that floor and sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm here. But we're gonna go home every week. We're gonna go back and we're gonna stay close to the pain, because it's that lived experience. It's not just that Congress needs to look differently. It needs to feel different. It needs to speak differently. And I'm so incredibly proud that I bring that lived experiences of being the eldest of 14, being part of UAW Home, child of Palestinian immigrants, all of that with me when I come into the House floor.
Thanks very much. Jamaal, what is your background? How did that influence your politics?
Wait a minute. Did Rashida just say she was the eldest of 15?
14.
14?
Oh yeah, you got to meet them. That crew,
that's how she got elected. That was half.
As a voting block. I have a voting block.
Well, I am the middle child. I have 4 sisters. I have 2 older and 2 younger. Raised by a single mom who worked in the post office. She graduated high school, worked in the post office, and was a member of the postal union my entire life. Lived in public housing, lived in the housing projects and rent-stabilized apartments. Went to public schools my entire life, and I was lucky because I grew up in a very diverse community. And I say lucky because we know how segregated our country is. Every city, every state, every town is incredibly segregated. But when you grow up in a diverse community, you get to connect with and learn about other people and other cultures from all parts of the world. And my lived experiences growing up in a single mom, growing up during the crack cocaine epidemic, which ravaged Black and brown communities in particular. Also, the AIDS crisis was around when I grew up. And growing up in a diverse community gave me lived experiences that I think just gave me a certain level of empathy and compassion as I approached education first and foremost, as a teacher, school counselor, and middle school principal. And it made me like a social justice educator. It wasn't just about providing a quality academic environment. It was about social and emotional learning. It was about mental health. It was about interrogating the community and why certain communities lived in concentrated poverty and others did not. That question sort of drew how I approach education from the very beginning. And as a candidate, it's those lived experiences, to Rashida's point. And I think just people are ready to connect with real people. They're tired of politicians speaking this foreign language jargon that makes no sense. Politicians who've been in office for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, claiming that they have all this power and this legacy, while people are still struggling in poverty. People are struggling with food insecurity, housing insecurity, struggling in underfunded schools, lack of opportunity. So, I think everyone across the country, from Michigan to New York to Missouri, are tired, particularly in this moment, with COVID happening and the Black Lives Matter movement. People are tired of the status quo, and they're tired of the same old, and they're ready to vote people in that they can connect with very authentically, because this is a politics of love, not a politics of fear. And this is about deep, authentic relationships, not about transactional politics. That's not what we're about. It's not what Rashida's about. It's not what Cori's about. I think that's what people are ready for, and that's what people are demanding. And in terms of the vision for the future,
I'm going to hold off on that one. I want to get back to that one.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Cori, how did your background, did you grow up in St. Louis?
Yes, I grew up, born and raised. My father has been in politics for most of my life, but he was also a union meat cutter. And so I grew up, in this union household. My mother worked she was like a computer analyst, but they still didn't bring, it wasn't still a lot of money. We still had our struggles. But, I saw my dad, person by person reach people. He was boots to the ground. Like, that's how he taught us. We had to knock every door when it was time for his, when it was time to campaign for him. We had to shake every hand. We didn't do daddy daughter to the, to the food place or whatever daddy daughters do. We did daddy daughter to the campaign function, daddy daughter to the banquet. But when I got a little older, I had a situation where I had a racist administrator at a school. I was that A student all through my life. And the thing was, Cori's going to go to college and she's going to have a full ride. Like, that was the setup. I was going to Howard University and, all of this. But what happened was I had this racist administrator, and this person yanked the floor from up under me one day, and I didn't recover. And so I ended up spiraling at 14 years old, and then didn't end up getting the scholarship to college. And it sent me into a different place. Ended up working low wage jobs, ended up homeless with 2 children, uninsured, just going through so much in the payday loan cycle, just really fighting and really struggling. And so that's I can still feel that, because it's taken me so long to climb out of that. Still, I finally went back to school and got my nursing and became a nurse. But the debt that I incurred doing that, and then fighting that and fighting medical debt from not having insurance, and just so much, and then doing that as a single parent, just trying to do that, and then hoping that nobody kills my son.
How old are your kids,
My
Cori?
daughter is now they're 19 and 20. So my son is taller than me. He has a mustache, and I worry about him every day. So that fuels me doing this work, because somebody has to save our lives. Somebody has to speak up and be fearless.
Okay, let me get back to Rashida, and we'll go around. Rashida, what were you hearing as you campaigned from your constituents? What's going on? I mean, Detroit, it's no secret, has had a lot of problems for a number of years now. What have you been hearing lately?
Yeah, I am so incredibly proud. I grew up in a diverse community like Jamaal. I mean, 20 different ethnicities in Southwest Detroit. But, I grew up in one of the most beautiful, blackest cities in the country. Every corner is a reminder of the movement. So this uprising feels home. It feels this is what we're supposed to do to have transformative change. And, Amo Bernie, what I heard from people is the constant thing that I continue to hear. Are you going to be one of those? Are you going to be one of those that when you get there, you're going to sell us out? Are you going to be one of those that forgets where you came from? Are you going to be one of those that goes numb and watches us all die from COVID while we bail out airlines and banks and corporations? That's what you hear. They just want they just want us on their side. They want somebody that's going to put them first. I mean, just lead with compassion and understanding that, they're not going to be able to go and hire special interest groups always. I mean, we have some grassroots groups that support us and are with us, but not all of them get the DC to come and lobby like the pharmaceutical companies do and all those. they just want us to stay connected to them and speak on their behalf and advocate on their behalf. Every time I go on to the floor to speak, or even on a committee hearing, my staff and I, we talk about this, and I always tell them, we got to bring the district in the room with us. Start with the district. What is going on in the district? And then go after Mnuchin, then go after some of those folks and ask them, well, this is what's happening. We lost more Black home ownership in Michigan than any Black ownership, literally in Michigan, than any other state. What's going on there? Why is that happening? Why is it that you're seeing other communities thrive, but not Black and brown communities? And so for them, for many of my neighbors, Bernie, they just don't want us to forget them when we get there.
Okay, good. Jamaal?
Same thing. So from the very beginning, we made sure to start our canvas in the housing project. We went right to public housing and we started knocking on doors there, because we know that's where the people have been ignored. They've been neglected. They've been marginalized for the longest. And to Rashida's point, they just wanted someone that they could believe in, that they could connect with, that can give them hope once again, and someone who was going to go to Washington and fight for them, because it hadn't been happening for so long.
Jamaal, what you and Rashida are both saying is that people don't perceive that establishment politics know what's going on, and the politicians know what's going on in their lives. Is that what you're hearing?
Correct. And when you just look at public housing for a moment. So public housing has been disinvested in for the last 30 years and hasn't received a dime from the federal government in the last 10 years. So that's something that's really resonates and is real for people, and something that they're struggling with every day. And when you take COVID, for example, in New Rochelle, one area of our district, in an upper middle class area of New Rochelle, that's where the second COVID case happened in New York State. And because the area was upper middle class, we contained the area, we closed the schools, we brought in the National Guard, we gave out food, we brought in a testing site, we did what we were supposed to do. Co-op City, which is right down the street, which is the largest naturally occurring retirement community in the world, took another 23 days to get a testing site. Yonkers, Mount Vernon, and NYCHA, where poor Black and brown people live, took another 53 days to get a testing site. So when we talk about the disparities, it's not just the pre-existing condition of being poor and Black in this country, it's how we responded once COVID hit. So that's the frustration that people were communicating. Lack of healthcare, being underinsured, housing insecurity, food insecurity. Our campaign became part of a mutual aid network that had to get food to people in the middle of a pandemic, not just because of failure from the Trump administration, but we're talking about failure top to bottom, Democrats and Republicans, in terms of their response to this pandemic.
Cori, what were you hearing out on the campaign trail?
Oh my goodness. So healthcare was a huge issue, especially in my district, where we're talking about people with underlying, we are a predominantly African-American district. That is starting to change right now as we speak, but predominantly African-American community where there is poverty. So we have people who didn't have healthcare, or they have the access, but they don't actually have the care because they can't afford the medicine, or they can't afford to go to the doctor. And so we had this situation where people were just, our essential workers. Of course, they're the ones that are going to work. So they were the ones getting sick. People in the nursing, working in nursing homes, they were the ones getting sick. And what could we do about it? So I was hearing, so many people getting sick and they couldn't do anything. Like myself, I was uninsured and I was sick with COVID symptoms for 2 months, and there was nothing I could do about it. I have 2 stacks of hospital bills right now, doctor's bills and the ambulance bill. So that's what people are going through. And on top of that, the same thing that that Jamaal was just speaking about, all of those things that Jamaal just said, we have had that happening here too. But what people were saying was, where is our leader? Where is our congressperson? Not having an active leader really makes a difference. When in this district, people are so used to not seeing their congressperson. People are so used to being treated like, if you have, like me, if you've been evicted before, then you're less than, well, no, we're changing that. I need people to know that even though we're in a position where about 43 million people are starting to be evicted, that is our work. We have to stand up for those people right now.
Good. All right, let me ask you, let me throw this out. I think one of the differences between liberals and progressives, and we are progressives, is that it's not just we're fighting for the right things, we are prepared to take on powerful special interests. And that we know, and I've always known, that real change never takes place without struggle. That is the history of any real change in America. No one gives you anything. You got to take it, you got to fight for it. In the last 4 months, you may or may not know, and the viewers may or may not know, that 500 billionaires have seen their wealth increase by $700 billion in the midst of this pandemic, when, as you have all described, your constituents are in desperate condition, losing their homes, not having any health care, unable to pay their debts. All right. What do you make of a nation in which 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of America, and the billionaires are becoming richer every single day? What is that about? What do we do about it? Is it an issue? Many of my colleagues in the Senate don't talk about it. The corporate media doesn't talk about it. What do you think? That an issue, Rashida?
Well, I'll tell you right now, when you say I'm ready any day, any time to take on these corporate bullies. Because when we open that curtain, I'm telling you, I don't care if it's mass incarceration, poverty, or housing, or access to water alone in my district. If you open up the curtain, it's the same people behind that curtain that is making money off of our oppression, making money off of our pain, our deaths, our sicknesses. And so, you know, I thrive when it comes to just exposing people for their ugliness of, you know, corporate greed, and showing people they deserve better. And I'll tell you, you know, the tainting of the process is real, y'all. I've been there a year and a half and I see it. It's not that people don't even want to talk about it. It's that people have opened the doors for them to shape policies and shape decisions that literally allow people in my community not to have access to water, to clean water. They're literally doing—
Rashida, I know that you have been, you know, people are out there and they're saying this woman comes from a major city, Detroit. What is she talking about? Access to clean water. Say a word about that and then say, I was with you.
You see that? I want everybody to see, he still mentors me. I get a poll, listen, I get a poll that says I'm going to beat her 2-1. He's like, throw the poll away. Get your butt out and throw it away. You focus. I loved it. I was like, I told my team, Bernie said, put it away. We got to, you know, keep going. I'll tell you.
And also, when I was out in Detroit, we went through a very interesting day. Rashida took me around the community, and I won't forget what I saw. But one of the things, we saw some beautiful, beautiful kids, high school kids. Were telling us they don't even have decent books. Meanwhile, we were looking at some huge stadium with some billionaire who got a tax break, huge tax break, right?
Yes.
All right, talk a little bit about what's going on.
So just for folks to know, you know, there's about 7.2 miles in Detroit that has got this tremendous wealth. You see development and all this. That's not actually translating in combating poverty, translating in improving people's lives immediately, or anything like that. But 2 blocks away from this hockey stadium in Little Caesars Arena is a high school called Cass Tech. And Cass Tech High School had to shut down all of their fountains because there was too much lead in the water. And this is a school that literally is 2 blocks away, but they diverted, you know, close to $600 million of public tax dollars into a for-profit hockey stadium for a billionaire. And my folks are sitting here talking to a U.S. senator, you know, these young people, I mean, Bernie saw, and they were saying, you know, that sometimes we don't even have teachers. We only have permanent substitute teachers, that we don't have books, that some of our teachers have to leave. I was in tears when one of them said, my teacher has to rush out the door around 3 o'clock because she has to go to her second job because she can't afford not to work another job because of the pay. But when it comes to water, there are thousands of my neighbors in Detroit and really throughout Wayne County in Michigan, in my district, that are getting their water cut off for less than $500 or so. And water has increased, you know, affordability is just like 30% increase. And so we're fighting for water as a human right fund. As you know, Senator, got some tremendous, even Leader Schumer has been out there about it. We got to keep fighting for it. But people are actually living without running water. And I tell you, I hear this from my Brightmoor neighborhood of a mother who, her water got shut off one day. You can guess this, Cori. The next day, Child Protective Services came and got her kids. They took away her kids because of negligence. She got one in water, so it's not a safe place for her kids. Just being poor in our country right now is criminalizing. It is so dehumanizing. And so for all the corporate bullies and the corporations that think that they're going to make government about them, there's a bunch of us coming, and our squad is getting bigger and bigger. And we're going to continue to fight back against that. And we're going to show people what they deserve. Like Jamaal said, love of politics. We're going to deserve, politics of love. We're going to show people that there are folks that love them, that there are folks like us that deeply care about their well-being, because they don't deserve anything less, Bernie. I'm so tired of folks in this amount of pain and hurt right now when they see us, folks making decisions that leave them behind.
Jamaal, what do you think about the power of the corporate elite of a nation where so few have so much, so many have so little? And by the way, it's not only economic, it's powerlessness. What you guys were talking about a moment ago, you knock on the doors of projects, people have no power. They don't believe that any of their concerns is going to be addressed. Jamaal, what's your feeling about that?
Our political and economic system is genocidal. Like, we're literally killing people for profit. We have a pandemic where we have well over 150,000 dead, and the millionaire and billionaire class has grown. 2 weeks ago, Jeff Bezos made $13 billion in one day, in a single day. And we have people in the streets lined up for food pantries trying to feed their families. It's genocidal. It's been unequal since the inception of this country. But over the last 40 years, when you talk about big money in politics and how our elected officials have been co-opted by the private elite, it's gotten worse. So I want to challenge everyone who calls himself a Democrat to stop taking corporate PAC money. At the very least, do not take money from the military industrial complex, do not take money from big pharma, and do not take money from the fossil fuel industry, and also big real estate, at the very least. Because I believe that I'm a part of something that we're taking the baton and the torch from the civil rights movement. And Dr. King called out militarism, capitalism, and racism as the three evils that we were fighting against. And I will add sexism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, Islamophobia, xenophobia as something that we're all fighting to defeat during this time. So I want to challenge my Democratic colleagues. Stop taking corporate PAC money. Stop feeding industries that are literally killing us. And if you're Black and brown and poor, you're more likely to get sick, to have poor academic outcomes, and have poor economic outcomes as well.
And by the way, let me inject that and agree with you 100%. And I say this to the viewers out there, you who have supported these candidates with your $20 checks or your $10 checks, you have resulted, your work has resulted in these guys getting elected. Because what is beginning to happen now is candidates like Jamaal and Rashida and Cori can run without being dependent on big money interest. They can speak for the people because they're being funded by the people. That is part of the political revolution. It's a big deal. And I want to thank everybody out there who has helped these guys and so many other progressive candidates, as well as myself. Cori,
can I say one thing quickly, Cori, before we go to you? Bernie, if the Democratic establishment didn't gang up on you and jump you, you would have been the nominee for the Democratic Party. You outraised everyone. You was killing them. They had to jump you in order to beat you. So I just want to say that outright. If they didn't jump you, you would have been the nominee. So I just want to say that. My bad. Go ahead.
We know. Thank you very much, Jamaal. And let me thank all three of you for your support. Rashida and I have been working together for a long time. Jamaal, I know you've been there. Cori, I think the last event we did before we had to stop events because of the virus was in St. Louis, and Cori was great. But Cori, what's your take on this issue of corporate power, of income and wealth inequality? Is that an issue that resonates in your community?
It is an issue. And one thing that we're looking at right now in our district is, privatization, and so like they're trying to, locally, they want to privatize our airport. So let's just take that. When we privatize our airport, looking at people that look like me in this district, a lot of us, we work in the public sector. but so when you change that to private, when you privatize that, then we lose unions. We're going to go and now we have to work for lower wages. We can miss out on health care. That changes families, that breaks down families right here in our communities, while there are people that then get to profit and benefit off of it and bring their cousins in and all of this, and there is this situation where it just widens the disparities that we already have here. But then they put this pretty picture, this frame around it to say, oh, well, it'll help because we'll give more money to the police and that'll make your streets safer. Well, no, actually what will make our streets safer is if police are being policed. And if we put social workers, out, we get more social workers, we get more therapists, we put trauma-informed care in our schools and in our healthcare system, and that's what will make the community better. Not having these people that get money every single time they, get a contract. And while we have people out on the street right now, I have to drive past them to get to my campaign office, sleeping on the street every single day, and families.
All right, let me move in a different direction. I want us to think about the future, to envision a new America. All right. Question, is healthcare a human right or is it a privilege? Why? What is it? Rashida?
Absolutely, it's a right. Healthcare, let me tell y'all, like the first month I think I was elected, I get a young woman came to one of my town halls. And she came up to me and she said, all of a sudden, her employer said that insulin wasn't preventive care. It wasn't preventive medicine. I'm like, doesn't it prevent death? And I said, how much you pay? She said, $2,800. She said, before I was only paying less than $300, which is still a lot. And, worked for the auto industry. I said, okay, well, tell me which company it is. Cause I knew we're still fighting for Medicare for all, as you all know, probably get closest we can get to universal health care. And I used the power of my letterhead. I put the mission statement of the company on top. And I said, if this is your mission statement, then why are you doing this to your families that work for you, that help your company succeed? And she told me, I think a couple months later, she said, Rashida, I went to go pick it up and it was less than $300 again. And I say this all, when you're asking why, it's because no one deserves to die because they're too poor. No one deserves to feel less than and to not get care. I mean, what I love about some of my new class members is it's that lived experience I talk about, Bernie. One of the things that one person said is, I lost my mother because she had breast cancer so late. She found out later. She never went to doctor because she didn't want that bill. She was so afraid of going bankrupt. And so we got to make it a human right. We got to make it accessible to everyone. No one should be profiting off of our illnesses, off of our death.
Jamaal, healthcare a human right?
Absolutely a human right. It's crazy that we even have to have this discussion. My mom is 75 years old. Recently had some issues with her kidneys and a couple of mild strokes. And after serving in the post office for 33 years, being a part of the union, retiring with a pretty decent pension, I couldn't tell you how challenging it was for like 6 to 8 months to get my mother the home health care that she deserved, that she earned after working in the post office for 33 years. And thankfully, my sisters and I came together to provide her the support she needed. But just as quickly or as easy as it is for me to pick up the phone, dial 911, and get a cop to come to my house about a particular crime, I should be able to get healthcare access for my mom, and everyone in this country should be able to get healthcare access for their families, not just in terms of long-term care, but we're talking mental health, other curable diseases. So many people are dying from curable diseases because they're uninsured or underinsured and afraid to go to the doctor to get the
Jamaal, the number that I have heard, it's an unbelievable number. You talk about ugliness and cruelty. 60,000 Americans every year die because they don't get to a doctor when they should. Cori, healthcare a human right?
Absolutely, it's a human right. As a nurse and most of my background being in community health, I've seen my patients die because they didn't have health care. My patients were rationing their insulin, and not only rationing the insulin, but they were then sharing it with a cousin. So so just totally going against the doctor's orders, and they weren't getting the medication that they needed, and so they would die. They would get a foot cut off, then a leg, and then they would die. uh, you know, just thinking about what that also does to your credit. How do we come out of a place of poverty when if we don't have insurance? That is always that's going to our credit. And for somebody like me, if I'm a Black woman making 61 cents on the dollar, so I don't even get my whole dollar. And then on top of that, if I don't have insurance, then that money is, then I'm in this spiral of debt. And then, even myself, just thinking about working as a nurse, I remember having a patient. It was a young woman. She had 4 children. They were all stair step, and this woman made her way to the mental health clinic. She took public transportation with these 4 children. She was actively hallucinating. She was not well. She needed her medicine, but she made it all the way to the clinic. She sat in the waiting area for an hour and a half waiting to see the doctor. We finally got her in to see the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist wrote medications for her. She was so happy because she was there. She walked into my office. The issue was she didn't have health. She didn't have health insurance, and so I had to find a way to get her medication. $3,600 worth of medication. I had to try to find that, but the problem was those particular medications we couldn't give her that day. So I had to tell this woman that came through all of that, that had these children that were screaming and jumping off of everything, and she was just trying to get help. She came to the clinic to get help, and we couldn't help her. We have to do better because we did not do her a service nor those children a service.
I'm thinking, Rashida, you may recall that during my campaign, I took a trip over from Detroit with a bunch of folks from the Midwest into Canada, maybe, 10, 15 miles into Canada, a short trip, to buy insulin, what you were talking about, Rashida. Anybody here know the difference in price for insulin in Canada compared to the United States? You know what the differential is? It's 1/10 the price. 1/10 for the same exact product made by the same exact company. Difference being that in Canada, their government does not allow the drug companies to rip off their people. They negotiate a reasonable price. As you know, in our country, because of the power of the pharmaceutical industry, they can charge any price that they want. And they do. And they kill people as a result. All right. So what we have got to be thinking about, and I know this sounds radical to some of the folks out there, is if somebody walks into a store and shoots somebody and kills somebody, we say, that's a murderer, bad. But somehow or another, if you're the head of a pharmaceutical industry and you raise prices as high as you can and people die because they don't have the product they need, well, what are you? Are you a murderer? No, you're a great business person, right? Well, I think we got to rethink that type of stuff. All right. And believe me, we're going to have to, Cori, we're going to need your help. Jamaal, we're going to need your help. Take on these drug companies. They are crooks.
Yes.
They engage in price fixing. In terms of the opioid epidemic that we have seen, they were pushing their product all over this country, knowing that people were getting addicted. Don't get me onto the drug companies, or you guys will never have a chance to talk. That won't be a good thing. All right, I want to get to another issue, which we don't talk about enough. Before the pandemic, Trump was saying, unemployment is low. We got a great economy, working great for the African-American community, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Meanwhile, before the pandemic, half of the people in this country were living paycheck to paycheck. Tens of millions of people working at starvation wages. All right. Rashida, what about low wages in Michigan? Issue?
Absolutely. I mean, my folks are check by check. I mean, they were survivor mode. I have the 3rd poorest congressional district in the country. People are now starting to say it, know it. Before, people didn't even understand. When I said check by check, I'm literally telling people they're like one emergency away from, completely just being, out in the streets. And it is so difficult sometimes when you see, our neighbors working so incredibly hard. And then at the end of the day, it's like we don't have their back. We don't think they deserve health coverage or be able to retire to a decent age or any of that. But it's absolutely an issue. It is hard. I had a mother come in and tell me it was like an early childhood education. They closed it down, and she was kind of in tears and she was crying. I was like, "What's wrong? Is it okay? Are you okay?" She goes, "You don't understand. that's the place that my kids can eat twice a day. That's how much they're suffering, like, and I'm so tired. The first week, Bernie, they had a federal shutdown. Did you remember this? Our colleagues were like, why is the federal employees at the food bank line? Why are they over there? What are they doing over there? Can't they? I'm like, because what are you talking about? What do you think they're millionaires like you? Like, what is wrong with y'all? Like, I don't understand because they don't have money. They don't have the check coming in. Like, it is so unbelievable how disconnected some people are and people living.
I think, we have got to start focusing, in my view, the major economic crisis that we have, I'm even talking about before the pandemic, is low wages. Jamaal, what is low wages? In New York City, the cost of housing is off the wall, right?
Well, it's off the charts. We have, so if we were a nation, we would have the 8th worst economic inequality in the world. So that's what was going on in this district. And of course, unfortunately, if you're Black or brown, you're more likely to live in poverty. And we also have the highest number of WIC recipients of any congressional district in the country. So it's completely out of control. Unemployment and underemployment is out of control. And this is where, I support a federal jobs guarantee, making sure that we pay everyone a family sustaining wage in alignment with the cost of living index to make sure that people can afford their housing, their food, they earn sick leave, they earn vacation time, and they have universal health care. We gotta invest in people who have been disenfranchised, neglected, and ignored for decades, and stop investing in the 1% and 0.1%. And I think we can do that through a true federal jobs guarantee and bring the unemployment number down to 0, not at 9% or 6% where we think it's okay to be at 6%.
And the beauty of a federal jobs program, we're not talking about make work here. We're not just talking about giving somebody a shovel and dig a hole. There are enormous needs in this country.
Yes.
We got to rebuild our infrastructure. We got to deal with climate change. We got to deal with education, with healthcare. There is a desperate need for workers in this country to help rebuild America. But let me get to Cori. Cori, Missouri, are low wages an issue?
Yes, low wages are an issue. We worked really hard to try to get $15 an hour, and St. Louis City had it, and then the state came back and made a decision to take it away. But we did get something out of it. But the thing is, saying $12 an hour is enough to raise a family on. It's not. $15 an hour. Even though that's what a lot of us have been asking for, but it's that still can have people struggling depending on where you live. So that's not. It shouldn't be too much to ask for when we have people who are working. People are working 40, 50-hour weeks and then have to go and work a second job just to be able to pay the bills. We're not. Rent is not going down. Food prices are not going down. We have people right now who are at risk for utility shutoffs, some who have had shutoffs, people that are facing these evictions. What do we do with those people? Because the other thing is this, our essential workers, many of them weren't even making $15 an hour. Many of them were making $9, $10 an hour. And we have a whole group of people making $10 an hour, supporting a family, not getting any kind of hazard pay. And then the same people who are also the at-risk population.
And Cori, some of those
uninsured.
people, when they're making $8 or $9 an hour, they're not even working full-time.
No.
They get part-time jobs, correct?
That part-time jobs. And so, the other part of that is you can't even get health care. I mean, you can't even get child care that way. So, that really makes it difficult. We have so many people that are in a place where people don't understand. If you haven't been, some people that haven't been there may not really understand. I've been there. I know what that's like, working low wage, and you don't know what's going to happen with your children.
All right, I want to get back to another issue, which is of enormous consequence, and that is education, the future of America. And I don't even want to get into what this pandemic has done to kids in this country. I don't know. I got 4 grandchildren. Kids are not going to school. I can't even begin to imagine what this means in terms of their intellectual futures. But talk a little bit, Rashida, about the quality of schools now, whether we're attracting the best and the brightest to be educators. What about childcare? What about college? What about student debt? What's going on in the Detroit area?
I mean, right now, you know, I was talking to our superintendent for the state. You know, we're going to be in a deficit, of course. If people don't understand, the revenue is going to drop. I mean, I think the Center for Budget and Policy said we're going to have a shortfall of $305 billion alone nationally for school funding. Which, you know, folks, my school district's already talking about having a 2-day rather than 5-day week of school weeks, because they know that it's just not going to be possible, not just only because of the pandemic, but because of the result of the loss in revenue from the pandemic.
So let's say that again. I want everybody to hear.
Okay.
In the United States of America, the wealthiest country.
He does this, Jamaal. You'll get used to it.
No,
I'm helping you articulate.
Stop it.
You're gonna learn that.
Hey, I'm a Bernie. I'm not saying no. I'm just letting the other kids know what happened.
You see,
Okay.
it's hard raising kids, isn't it? And I've been trying to raise her. Look what I get. But here we are.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about school districts right now that are talking about, one, you know, obviously the pandemic is preventing the full opening, but also they're already seeing that there's going to be a huge deficit. They're not going to be able to have the per pupil allotment enough to be able to have 5-day week schools. They're talking about 2 days because, again, the loss in revenue is $305 billion that they need right now. That's the estimation so far. And that's just with the pandemic. We had what it's been now 6, 7, or 8 months.
No,
imagine, yeah. Did I do it
That
right? Did I do it right?
was pretty good.
That was
Okay.
great. That was great.
I'm gonna come
What do
back.
you want me to say? I'm trying to give people numbers. You want me to repeat it? Listen, all y'all, like, I think everybody that's listening knows this. Our kids don't come first anywhere. I don't understand why is it that people are like, oh my God, you're look at you guys. Why are you guys all doing this or that? And not this absurdity of it where, you know, you should see them. You talk about airlines, they're like, oh my God, we have to go save the airline. And then you're like, hey, school districts, they're like, what? And I mean, it's so bizarre. And it's that disconnection that we continue to have.
And they go on telling us how much they love America, except they don't quite love the children of America.
Yeah.
The future of
Well,
this.
I tell you, kids, especially in Detroit, my city, children, poverty among our children has increased. But I just, you know, it's the trauma. Like, I think, you know, my colleague, my wonderful sister in service, Ayanna Presley, you know, she had a House Oversight Committee have a hearing just on trauma of children and talking about how we don't realize the decisions we make, things that are happening, how traumatic it is for our children. But right now, our kids, I mean, our per pupil allotment in Detroit is probably, it's literally the same amount that it was 20 years ago. I mean, it just hasn't increased, even though the demand, the need is increased, the
And
cost.
as I recall, you got a real teacher shortage there in Detroit, correct?
Oh, huge. I mean, Bernie, I got people that literally they have a permanent substitute teacher and they got, you know, obviously oversized classes, but I mean, our folks are, you know, I'm really disturbed, even though I'm a Bernie, like I have more cops and security than I have social workers and teachers in our schools. It's so devastating because, you know, Jamaal, you know this, that one kid, that one incident, it's like, you're going to handcuff them. You're not going to sit down and say, what's going on? Why are you so angry? What is going on? Like, we're not even doing that anymore. We're dismissing and criminalizing. Why? Because I truly believe there is a for-profit scheme that is involved in all of it to make sure that our public school education system is failing.
Jamaal, you are an educator. You've been working with kids much of your adult life. What's the status of education? What do you want to see happen?
Yeah, it's definitely a for-profit scheme, and it's also genocidal as well, because not only is there a school to prison pipeline, but we're also medicating kids at a younger age without providing them the mental health supports that they need. And just going back to what you said before, billionaire wealth has grown by over 770 billion. Our schools need half that, and we can't get the resources to our schools, right? It's deplorable, it's unacceptable, and in my opinion, it's genocidal. And again, it goes to a system that isn't working for our kids. And one area I want to focus on just really quickly, when I talk about a federal jobs guarantee, universal childcare is a part of that equation,
Right.
particularly early childhood, birth to age 8. Because the brain develops rapidly, 80% by age 3. And if we can help deal with the trauma, to Rashida's point, between birth and age 3, our kids will be much more ready to enter kindergarten at age 5. So universal child care, federal jobs guarantee focused on early childhood educators and caregivers, and just growing the care economy overall, more nurses, more teachers, more people providing care, that will help to provide the holistic education that our kids need.
What a radical idea you guys are espousing, worrying about the kids more than the billionaires. Woo! All right, what's coming next? Cori, what's going on with the kids in St. Louis and in Missouri?
So schools are closing, you know, even this was pre-COVID, schools closing, especially in our inner city area, you know, and we hear that it's because of the population decline. But why are people leaving? People are leaving because we're not taking care of those communities and funneling resources into those areas. And so people will move because crime is high. People will move, but also you know, we have schools that still have lead or possibly may have asbestos. We are, some of our schools they're accredited, some are not accredited. They go back and forth. Why are we fighting with accreditation, you know, in this day, in 2020? You know, why is that even an issue? We should be so much further than that. And then we have some school districts, just like I know across in other places where we have the more affluent side, you know, they have all the resources, they have everything that they need. And then the districts who don't have that don't have that money coming in, you know, I guess based on property taxes, they don't have those resources. So our children suffer. The thing is, why is there a difference made in what the resources that our children have and the way that we help them thrive, you know, if it's simply based upon dollars? So, and we have children coming to school that are in trauma. We don't have trauma-informed care in our schools. We have to do that. We have these SROs, these school resource officers that are in schools looking like a SWAT teams in our schools, and our children are supposed to learn. You know, I remember my children being a number. I remember asking my children telling me, "Oh no, don't call me that. Call me." It was like 94365 or something like that.
What?
You know, and I'm like, "No, I'm not. Yes, I'm not teaching you to be a number. This is not." But everything that they did was by their number, and it literally like they knew their number more than they knew anything. Like, what's your teacher's name? I don't know, but I'm 93465. You know, but that, you know, we're programming our children wrong. So we have to put more money into our school system, and I just don't understand. And maybe you all can help me with this. But help me understand about money that was pulled from the federal education system and that now sits in private prisons. You know, I just don't understand. And that started some years ago. I just don't understand how we can do that. And so we're over incarcerating and under educating our students. Missouri stays like about a D for education, you know, in this country. We're like number 45, 46, 47, something like, you know, we go back and forth. Why are we so low on the list? And the thing is, Missouri's best schools get to be a D. Like the best the best we have gives us a D across the country.
Cori, you know, the #1 budget just for the state of Michigan is corrections.
Which takes us, all right, one second, I want to go there.
It's insane, like that.
That's where I wanted to go, all right? We got more people in jail than any other country on earth, more than communist China, which is 4 times our size, disproportionately African-American, Latino, and Native American. Simultaneously, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. You all described the appalling challenges that public schools are facing today. All right, why do we have more people in jail than any other country? What are we going to do about criminal justice reform? Who wants to start off?
Oh no, you smell that? It's called corporate greed. I don't know how many times I gotta tell you. It literally, they make money off of the cell phone service, the food, the uniforms they have to wear. Everything is contracted out. It's all for profit. Even how they do it, and it's so evident that they're making money off incarcerating our people. The more they have, the more money they make. They're literally wanting to build a jail in my city before they want to go fix the fact that we have lead in our water. You know, and children can't learn if they're being poisoned. They just can't. I mean, any amount of lead is not safe. And our kids, you know, studies show that kids have a hard time learning when they have lead. Obviously, they're getting sick and they're not able to truly be able to develop their brains properly. But yeah, I mean, Bernie, it's the same thing. I mean, you open that curtain, it's the same thing. They're making money. They're making money off of our pain. They're making money imprisoning our brothers, our sisters, our relatives. You know, when COVID happened, I knew I had a high number of folks that are impacted by mass incarceration. But when COVID happened, my phone would not stop ringing to people saying, please get my son out. Please, my uncle's in there. This is a death sentence. You know, he just got a suspended driver's license. Like, please take him out. Like, because he's gonna die if he gets COVID.
And in fact, we had a live stream on this a few months ago. I don't know what the number is now. It's at least 500. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. 500 people in jail in the United States have died already from COVID. I think that's a conservative number. All right, Jamaal, say a few words.
Yeah.
Why do we have more people in jail? How do we reform what is clearly a broken and racist criminal justice system?
Well, according to the 13th Amendment, slavery is allowed to continue when you're in prison, when you're incarcerated. So it's a legacy of slavery. Mass incarceration and police brutality are part of the legacy of slavery. So we're targeting poor communities and communities of color. We've under-resourced them, we've neglected them, we've underfunded their schools, we've miseducated them, taken resources away, taken jobs away, and add police so that we can incarcerate people and allow them to work for pretty much no wages. So it is a for-profit industry. It's a slave-driven industry, and it's a legacy of racism that continues to live in our country as part of all of America's institutions. Structural racism lives within every American institution, and we have to deal with it honestly, explicitly, and urgently. And mass incarceration is a big part of that. And what we're talking about, love and care and compassion and empathy and true public health and public safety and the well-being of our people, is something that our country hasn't spoken about for a very long time. So it's good to be a part of a movement, our movement, that's going to create a country that centers the well-being of everyone versus what we've been doing the last 40 years.
Cori, what about criminal justice? I know you obviously were actively involved in Ferguson. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing, what you want to see.
Yeah, so I'm going to say, you know, I agree totally with Rashida and Jamaal, what you all were talking about, like that being the reason. And I think that also I can add that when we have, when there's no real police accountability, you know, how do people get to the point to where they are in prison? You know, locally, we were able to work, activists were able to work to close one of our medium security institutions. It had rats and mold, and it was just really deplorable conditions. It was inhumane to have people living that way, especially while they were people that hadn't even been convicted of anything, people who hadn't seen seen any kind of a judge. They were there because they didn't have the $300, or they did have, you know, they could have been at home waiting for court, but instead they were spending a year, you know, in this prison, in this lockup, away from
because they didn't have bail.
Jobs.
Is that because
they didn't have the bail?
I want to stop on that one note because I don't think a whole lot of people know this. I got to confess, I did not know this until a few years ago. We have about 2 million people behind bars tonight, and 20% of those people have not been convicted of anything. They are there because
700,000. 700,000.
Is that what it is? 700,000.
I'm helping you out, Bernie.
Oh, all right.
People don't talk. 700,000 are literally right now that haven't been convicted of crime or anything. They just can't afford bail. During a pandemic, they're still in there. Like in some states, they haven't let them out. And like, again, it's just because they didn't go before. They can't afford it. We raise money. I don't know. Watch Jamaal, Cori, you're going to get contacted by local groups. They reached out to me. We raised like $20,000 just for Mother's Day to bail out mothers on Mother's Day that could be with their family. It's just devastating.
All right, Cori, before you were rudely interrupted by Rashida. You'll get used to that.
Oh my God, Bernie. I was just helping. That's all.
But yeah, so when we do that, so we're stopping people, you know, we're holding people that shouldn't be held, and then so sometimes that causes an issue because then, you know, you put people into this cycle. You know, the other thing is we have people who are, once they're, the recidivism programs that we have. So once people are released from prison, where are we sending them to? You know, I had patients who would come to me they had to see me within 30 days of being released from prison, from the Department of Corrections. And they would come to me for mental health services. And what they would say to me is, nurse, I want to go back. I want to go back because, you know, it's too fast. They, you know, my kids won't talk to me. I've been away for 10 years, so they don't know me anymore. You know, my spouse won't talk to me, so they don't have family, you know, so they're like, I'm going to go do something so that I can go back to jail. I've had patients come to my office and say, you know what, you told me to let you know the day I was going to go kill my family. Today is that day. And they walk out, you know, and walk away. And then I'm, you know, but that is the other thing. We're not taking care of people when they are released from prison. We don't connect them. People learned a skill while they were in prison. Are we connecting them to that same opportunity once they're out of prison? You know, are we making sure, Senator Sanders, I know you have that, you know, I love your platform. You know, what are we doing with our HBCUs? Are we making sure, are we putting those programs inside the prisons, you know, those certificate or degree programs in the prisons so that people can come out with a real job, you know?
All right. We've covered a lot of grounds. And on a personal note, let me thank you all for being with us tonight. But I am very excited about continuing to work with Rashida when she allows me to say a few words.
Oh my God, I'm gonna get you back for this.
He is tearing you up tonight, Rashida.
I know, right?
I love her. I love her.
Cori, usually it's about, here she goes, you're crying again. I'm like, it's emotional.
And I want to thank Rashida. You will all notice I did not hear one word of profanity. We've been on the air for an hour.
I have been
in the chat.
This is an all-time
It was in the
world
chat.
record. And that is why, because I didn't mention our distinguished president. I did not mention him because that would get Rashida off and running. And the show would be off the air or something. But Jamaal and Cori, I am very excited about both of you being there. You're representing your constituents. God only knows we have an enormous amount of work to do. And I look forward to working with you. Okay, thank you all so much.
Cori.
Not me, us. I'm so happy and excited to work with you all. Bye.
Bye. Love y'all.
Good night.
Night.
Love you all.